on to my questions now, Dr. Mathur. So what is just some basics first, what is the current ISA membership and what are the targets for this year and the next year?
So we have 95 members who have signed up.
Yeah.
And 74 who have ratified.
Okay.
But this is changing by the day.
Hmm.
We have new countries who are putting in both their signatures and ratifications. So this is a moving number as we go along. For this calendar year 2021, we would like to take the number of countries who have ratified to be over 90, and the number of countries who have signed to be over 100.
Okay.
So, as you can see, our emphasis is on ratification.
On ratification, right. Okay. And what is your perspective on the global solar power sector pre and post COVID, and what kind of changes are you expecting in the near future, like short term, medium term, and long term?
So, Khushbu, it really depends on when we get round the clock renewable electricity that is competitive with fossil fuel-based electricity, and this is important for two reasons. First is, then this becomes the default strategy. It becomes the priority, the default priority as far as energy supply is concerned, whether it is political decision making or whether, more importantly, it is financial decision making. Because everybody who goes in for renewables ultimately has to get an approval from the bank, and the bank sees, are you going to get your money back? As we were discussing earlier, I expect this to occur, and it will be different years in different geographies, but certainly in all geographies, it would be over by 2030. So starting 2022, 2023 until 2030 is the time period in which we will start seeing round-the-clock solar being competitive with fossil fuel electricity.
Okay.
This has the huge implication that, especially in terms of new capacity which is being added in every developing country, it will be based on renewables and not based on fossil fuels. That's the first point that I'd like to make. The second is that in the developed countries, it now becomes much more viable to shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And then that the rate of changeover is completely dependent on how much money they are able to put in. Certainly the plants which are already amortized, where the fixed costs have already been recovered, those can very, very quickly move to renewables. And we'll have to see how the rest do. Different countries have put out very ambitious targets. Very, very clearly, for those ambitious targets to be met, it is important that this grid parity of round-the-clock renewables is achieved within the next few years.
Right. Okay. And specifically, I think ISA also had a program last year called ISA Cares, which was specifically launched for COVID support. So, what was ISA's experience on that?
So, I think the most important issue is solar in healthcare is now ever more important than it was earlier.
Right.
If you are looking at a range of medical interventions, not just the COVID vaccine, but a range of interventions, it has reiterated the importance of having a cold chain to maintain. And therefore, getting solar, in most developing countries, including in many parts of India, the problem with maintaining a cold chain in rural areas is the lack of electricity, the lack of reliable electricity.
Right.
And what solar does is it helps us cross that, and it is already helping us cross that at prices. Because, if you have to do it, how do you do it? You do it through diesel gensets. And solar plus batteries is cheaper than diesel gensets. So
Hmm.
very clearly, in many parts of the world, what this does is it allows
Hmm.
solarization to occur in those rural health facilities.
Right. Hmm. Right. And what are going to be ISA's focus areas in the near future?
So, I think the first point is to remember that ISA's goal is that solar renewables in general,
Yeah.
become the default priority, political priority for energy supply.
Hmm.
How will that happen? That happens when countries are able to take benefit of the learnings that are happening almost on a daily basis. Every day, we find that there are newer and lower costs.
Hmm.
Every day, we find that new sources of investments are coming in. Every day, we find that there are new technologies that are coming in. Every day. So
Right.
the first thing that ISA is focusing on is putting these together and bringing out an annual publication on advances in solar technology, solar investment, solar markets.
Right.
So that if a country or a company has to invest in solar, you do it based on today's learning, not yesterday or the year before.
Hmm.
This is something that is true across the world. So this is the first goal. The second is, in order for this to happen, you need to make money available. You
Yeah.
need to make human capacity
Hmm.
available. And human capacity is not just about designing a solar plant. It's also about how regulators look at it. It's about how bankers look at it.
Hmm.
Risk in solar plants is very different from risk in fossil fuel plants. How
Right.
do how do policymakers look at it? So we are therefore looking at capacity building across the entire value chain.
Hmm.
Right now, as we speak, there is a bankers training program occurring for Latin America,
Oh.
and it's with real-time Spanish interpretation.
Okay.
Even 24 hours after it had started, we got a request from a country, can we send in 17 people? We know we are a day late, but we want them there. So what we are seeing is that it is rising in the priority
Right.
of these financial agencies. This is great.
Hmm.
So that's the second,
Right.
and that's 2A. 2B is financing, because very often if you look at financing and of a fossil fuel plant and a solar plant, what is the big difference? The big difference from a financier's point of view is that there's a far greater first cost in solar.
Right.
In coal plant, the first cost is less, but because you also spend money on coal, the cost of coal electricity becomes
Hmm.
somewhat similar. But that's an operational cost. And this operational cost is very near zero in solar.
Right.
Now, solar investments are far more vulnerable to the cost of capital. If I have expensive money, solar is difficult.
Hmm.
It is important that we make cheaper money available in every part of the world. Remember, we want to get it done everywhere.
Yeah.
So if you're talking of the least developed countries, you're talking of the small island developing countries, you want this money to be available cheaply for solar investments in all of these countries.
Hmm.
And the last thing that we are focusing on is that in many of these countries, which I just said, the LDCs and the states, we are helping with, in a sense, the first project.
Hmm.
Actually putting in money, putting in effort, manpower to help the first project happen. But it's not a project for the sake of the project. It's a project so that the policies change, the processes change, so that a second project can occur, and then a third and a fourth and 100th.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. Right.
So we are using them as agents of change.
Hmm.
This sets up the place to bring in the money.
Hmm.
It helps build up the capacity. It
Hmm.
brings in the technology.
Hmm.
So it creates the kind of supply chain.
Hmm.
And on the other hand, you and I, as users in these countries, start getting benefit of the fact it can be locally sourced, that it produces electricity which is cheaper. You've got autonomy, you've got control over it. So users also start appreciating. So
Right.
those are the four big things: information and advocacy,
Hmm.
capacity building, finance,
Hmm.
and agents and projects as agents of change. Those are the four big things that
Right.
ISA is focusing on.
Since you spoke about financing, so what has been your experience in regions like Africa, Latin America? Like, how difficult is it to find financing for solar projects, and what can be done in these specific regions to ease access to affordable financing?
As I said, there are two kinds of problems that occur. Financing, first of all, financing is difficult. But the question is, why is it difficult?
Right.
And the two reasons why it is difficult is, number one, there is a uncertainty regarding if the investor has whether I'll get my money back.
Yeah, true.
And the second is, if I make a lot of effort, I as the investor, I do a lot of effort and I get one project, it's not worth my while. So the size of the projects is the second issue. So the way we are looking at it is that how do we overcome this? So in capacity building, as I said, in many of these countries, we are doing the project. Gotcha. And doing the project, we are creating the policy. So there's a second, there's a third. So that creates in the minds of people the comfort that there will be a second project and a third project and a fourth project. It's worth investing in. The second thing is, if I'm an investor, I'm putting in money. Over the life of the project, 25 years or whatever, I expect to earn money from it. So I expect to get back 150, 160% over the 25-year period. Okay? But then I say risks are too high. What ISA is working on is the creation of a risk facility. Okay. They're calling it the blended finance risk facility.
Okay.
And the goal is that this reduces the cost of capital and enhances capital flows into countries where they would not flow otherwise. And the third part is the capacity building that I said. You need that to also make the second project and third project and so forth.
Right.
So now the problem is that there are three chunks of money. There's the investment money, there's the risk management money, there is the readiness money.
Right.
And traditionally, these have come from different sources. The investment money has come from banks. The risk management money has come from multilateral banks and bilaterals. And the readiness money has come from philanthropic organizations.
Right.
These people, all three, need to be in the same room when a project from an LDC or a SID is discussed. We want to be able to do that.
Okay. And if I may ask, what has been the progress with the World Solar Bank that was being discussed?
Right. So this is the first step. The first point is, are we able to meet the current challenges? So this will tell us what those challenges are, where is it that we need to put in our effort. So the solar bank will be designed around those real world issues.
Okay. And what role do you expect green hydrogen to play in the near future with regards to solar, without solar?
Okay. So, Khushbu, this is, if I look at the future, I really look at two fuels. One is renewable electricity and the other is hydrogen, green hydrogen. Yeah. To me, this is the engine of growth of the future. Yes, we will have biomass energy. Yes, we will have wind. Yes, we will have nuclear. All those things will be there. But the vast dependence of the energy economies will be on renewable electricity and on green hydrogen. Okay. We don't use hydrogen at all except in the fertilizer industry and in the refinery industry. We get it from gas typically, and it costs something of the order of about $2 per kg.
Yeah.
Now, therefore, to me, there are two challenges. The first challenge is getting a range of other sectors used to using hydrogen. So instead of coal, can I use hydrogen in the steel industry? By 2030, the single largest industrial user of energy will be the steel industry in India.
Yeah.
Steel uses coal.
Yeah.
Can they use hydrogen?
They can.
Now, in the short term, I don't care where the hydrogen comes from. It could be from gas or whatever. But in the longer term,
yeah,
it has to come from the splitting of water using renewable electricity. Today, that hydrogen costs about $5 a kg. And in order to compete with gas-based hydrogen, it has to come down to $2 per kg. So to me, that's the second challenge. And we'll have to work on both of these in parallel. Get people used to using hydrogen. I would very much like, for example, the refineries of the world to wean us away from using other fuels and start using hydrogen. They are the guys who make hydrogen. They know how to do it. And today they're making it from gas, and hardly anybody makes hydrogen from crude oil, but all of these guys make it from gas. And tomorrow they should start making it from renewable electricity.
Right. And in your experience, what are some of the key policy gaps, with regards to solar power uptake that exist in some of these African countries or South American countries, or even in established markets like India or other European markets?
So the greatest challenge is the integration of variable renewables, whether it's solar or wind, because they produce electricity when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, and they don't produce it when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing. So they're intermittent. On the other hand, you and I need electricity when we need it. We can't depend whether the sun is shining outside or the wind is blowing. And therefore, grid stability becomes a key factor. Now, grid stability has many parts, but probably the most important part is storage, whether it's hydro storage or whether it's battery storage. Different countries have different kinds of storage. That becomes the key in how we move ahead. So therefore, being able to look at these storage facilities as buyers of electricity at one time during the day and as sellers of electricity at other times of the day becomes a key policy challenge. There are many days in the year, for example, when Germany runs entirely on renewable energy. But why? Because they're interconnected with the Norwegian system. The Norwegian system has a lot of hydro. And it is this balancing of renewables and hydro that the German and the Norwegian systems together are able to do. So this tells us the importance of storage. It also tells us the importance of interconnections.
Interconnection, right. Okay. And what is your vision for ISA, or how do you see the role of ISA evolving, in the near future?
The most important role of ISA is to support the challenges that countries have and accelerate solarization. So to cut a long story short, it's essentially about helping countries put in policies, try out pilots so that we start working on solar and quickly accelerate it from one project to 100 projects.
Right. Okay. And my last question would be that if you can shed some light on one certain, one gold, and one grid, if you can.
Sure. I mean, this goes back to the central point as I was talking about Germany and Norway. Yeah. The interconnection is important.
Yeah.
That's what one sun, one world, one grid is. We are already seeing regional grids evolve. So there is a regional grid in Southeast Asia. We are seeing some shoots of a regional grid emerging in South Asia. There is a regional grid in the Gulf countries, the GCC countries. There is a regional grid in South America and Latin America.
In Africa as well.
And Africa as well, in West Africa and East Africa. The reason is that countries do realize that selling electricity when they don't need it and buying electricity when they need it is of mutual benefit. Otherwise, everybody builds much more than they need. So regional collaboration is something that is completely understood. Now, the important issue is to connect the regional grid. So that is where these interconnectors become important. So if you connect the South Asian grid with the GCC grid, then when it is night in India and we have a great demand for electricity, the sun is still shining in the GCC countries. And solar electricity could flow from the GCC area into the South Asian area. And therefore, even at night, you could have renewable electricity.
Right.
So we are looking at the viability of this. We are looking at where does it make greatest sense to do these interconnectors. We are looking at the institutional issues. How do you govern it? On both sides, what are the political issues? What are the commercial issues? We have commissioned, we went through a tendering process and have commissioned a consortia led by Electricité de France to look at this. Their first report would be available in August, and a second one in October, and a third one in March, I think. Which would look at the viability, which would look at the countries where it makes greatest sense, and which would look at the institutional structures.
Okay, all right. I think that's with my questions.